And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Please like and share this video so you can help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. Links to those will be down in the description below. A lot to get into this week, so I want to jump right in, including my next NBA list. So stick around to the very end if you want to see that. I'm very, very excited about this one. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. So the Dallas Cowboys, first of all, I did not really give them much of a chance last week. The Dallas Cowboys are one of those teams that I truly never know what I'm going to get out of. Now, that honestly isn't to say that they haven't been consistently good over the last few years, because honestly they have. But in terms of the playoffs, it's one of those things where I genuinely have no idea what kind of Cowboys team I'm going to see. And unfortunately, most of the time what I'm going to see is an underperforming team that ends up not really going anywhere. So therefore, because of the past history of the Cowboys and the past history of one Tom Brady, who I'll get into a little bit later on, I picked the Buccaneers to win in my bracket last week. If you guys saw that, if you haven't seen it, definitely go check that out, by the way. But the Cowboys, of course, not only beat the Buccaneers, they absolutely steamrolled the Buccaneers. Now, to be fair, the Cowboys had a much, much more superior team than the Buccaneers did. They just did. I mean, basically at every facet, they were the better team. So is it shocking that the Cowboys went out there and dominated? No, not necessarily. However, the part that is shocking is that the Cowboys, quite frankly, have underperformed in the playoffs each and every year. And yet, this year, so far, they look exactly like they did in the regular season, which makes the most sense, but for the Cowboys, it's honestly a bit of a rarity. So I was a little bit shocked when I saw that. And now again, was I shocked in the way that, wow, I thought the Buccaneers were the better team? No, I didn't. But the Cowboys tend to choke in the playoffs every single year. But at least in their first game in the postseason this year, they did not choke. However, they are going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who I actually pegged to get this far and lose. However, now, knowing what I know, I said that Brock Purdy might be a little overwhelmed with playoff defenses and playoff football, considering how young he is, considering how inexperienced he is, and considering the fact that, quite frankly, he's not supposed to be here right now. He's not supposed to be the starting quarterback of the 49ers. It's supposed to be Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not supposed to be Brock Purdy. But Brock Purdy may have had the best performance of any quarterback in the playoffs last week. And that's saying something, because there were some really, really good performances, including one from Dak Prescott. So, am I ready to fully say that Brock Purdy has arrived and that he's going to be the starting quarterback of the 49ers next year? No, I'm not. But here's what I will say. If he wins this game and takes them to the NFC Championship game, and definitely if he ends up taking them to the Super Bowl, whether he wins or whether he loses the Super Bowl, I think at that point the 49ers are going to have a problem on their hands. But I digress. That is a video for another time. Let's get back to the Cowboys. So the Cowboys, I'm concerned. I really am concerned for how they're going to play next week. Now, the 49ers, let's be honest, 3 to 5 times better of a team than the Buccaneers are. I mean, they have more talent on defense, on offense, and unfortunately, at this point, with Tom Brady back there, again, who I'll get into a little bit more later, they might even have more consistent quarterback play at this point, which is just crazy to think about. But the Cowboys right now, they're going up against an absolute juggernaut team right now. The 49ers have looked unstoppable all year long. They've had a rotating carousel at quarterback because of injuries, and nothing seems to faze them at this point. They have great talent at all facets, and you know what? So do the Cowboys. So I think it's going to be a very, very fun game. I'm looking forward to see what happens. My prediction as to what happens, it's really anybody's call. I'm very concerned for the Cowboys. I can definitely see a world where the Cowboys get steamrolled by the 49ers. I definitely could see that. That certainly is a possibility. But I can also see a world where the Cowboys, overwhelm the young Brock Purdy, and he can't get throws off. He's getting sacked. He's throwing interceptions. I can see that as well. So certainly there's definitely two different possibilities there that I could very well see. My prediction, I'm taking the 49ers. I just still don't trust the Cowboys in the playoffs. But I'll say this. If the Cowboys beat the 49ers, I think at that point, I might have to take the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl because I have already seen this team beat the Philadelphia Eagles. I have. Now, granted, they didn't have Jalen Hurts, but I've already seen them do it. I've already seen them beat that team. So, it wouldn't shock me if they beat them again. Because, I mean, at this point, sorry, New York Giants, but you're not beating Philly. So, for me, it's one of those things where, I really I believe that the Niners have more of a chance to beat the Cowboys than the Eagles have a chance to beat the Cowboys, even though I think the Eagles are the better team overall. I know it doesn't make sense, but matchups are really a key here, in not just football, but in any sport. So I think the Cowboys match up better against the Eagles than they do against the 49ers. That's just how I feel. Now, I could be wrong about that. We'll see. But for me, if I were the Cowboys, I'd rather face the Eagles because you faced them twice already. You know what you have. You know what they are. You know what their strengths are. 49ers are really a bit of a wild card at this point. They have a fantastic team and a quarterback who's played absolutely lights out, but at any point could show that he's a rookie and play horrible. So it's one of those things where, you never really know what's going to happen. So I'd rather face the Eagles if I were the Cowboys than the 49ers because, again, the 49ers, you just don't really know what's going to happen. So, for me, is this the Cowboys' year? No, I don't think it is. I don't really think any year for the rest of time is going to be the Cowboys' year, but no, in all seriousness, I don't think it's this year. I think the Niners and the Eagles are both just a hair better than they are. Is there a world where they make it to the Super Bowl? Sure, of course. But for me, I'm taking the 49ers to beat them this week, and it's going to be an absolute slugfest between the Niners and the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and that is something that I am very, very much looking forward to. I want to move on to Adam Duvall. He just signed a 1-year, $7 million contract with the Boston Red Sox just yesterday or the day before at the time of this recording. So very interesting move from the Red Sox there. The initial fit, at least to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Because I think, honestly, we more need a corner infielder or some more pitching or bullpen depth than we do an outfielder at this time. However, there's a few different theories that are running around at this point. Because, I don't think Adam Duvall makes any sense in the Red Sox outfield. He's never been a good fielder, and whether he's playing right field or left field for the Red Sox, it's going to be very tough. Obviously, if he's playing left field, he's going to have to deal with the monster out there. He might not have to cover as much ground, which I'm sure would help him. But, that monster, playing balls off of that monster is very, very difficult for even the best of the defensive outfielders over the years. So I just don't see that making a ton of sense for a guy that's not a good outfielder to begin with. And certainly he's not going to be able to play in right field. Right field in Fenway Park is absolutely enormous. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense for him either because he wouldn't have the range to be a good defender out there, although we've seen J.D. Martinez play out there in right field and in left field sometimes, and I feel like most people are a better outfielder in terms of defense than J.D. Martinez, but I digress. So, that doesn't really make sense. And plus, the depth that we have in the outfield already is quite deep at this point. You got the new signing Masataka Yoshida out of Japan. That's going to be probably either one of the two corner outfield spots at this point. You've obviously got Kike Hernandez, who's been one of the better defensive center fielders in baseball over the last 2 seasons since you signed him. You've got obviously Rob Refsnyder, who you re-signed. There's a whole lot of guys out there. Obviously Alex Verdugo, guys that are still under contract, still out there. Jaron Duran, who's young and up and coming, that you want to get some playing time. So for me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for Duvall to get a lot of playing time in the outfield. So then why make the signing? Well, he could be the DH, but you just signed Justin Turner, presumably, to fill the primary DH spot, replacing JD Martinez. So, what do you do if you're the Red Sox? Well, there's a couple of theories going around right now. One is that Justin Turner is going to move to first base. He's going to be the primary first baseman for the Red Sox, and then obviously Adam Duvall would be the primary designated hitter, which I think makes logical sense. I think Justin Turner at this point is not a third baseman, and even if he was a everyday third baseman, we don't need one because Rafael Devers is over there. There's some people saying maybe Justin Turner can play third and Devers would be the DH. I just think that's a terrible idea. But I think that moving Turner to first base could make some sense. Perhaps Duvall at this point in his career could move to first base. I think that one, while it does make some sense, I think it's a little bit less logical than moving Turner over there, since Turner is already a corner infielder. It'd be a little bit easier of a transition for him, especially since he's up there in age. I think he's 37, 38 years old at this point. He's getting up there. Either way, whatever his age is specifically. Another one that I've heard is that Kike Hernandez is going to move to second base, which I definitely could see, although I'm a little hesitant on that because he has been so good in center field. I'm not sure I want that because, as much as I love Kike Hernandez and how important he was to our World Series run a couple years ago, he's not a great consistent hitter. He's gonna hit about 255, maybe 15 home runs. He's not gonna get on base or walk a lot. It's one of those things where you're like, okay, so he's not very valuable with the bat. If you're not going to be very valuable with the bat, I'd rather you be very valuable with the glove. And I'm afraid if he moves back to the infield, he won't be as valuable. So I'm not really sure what the Red Sox are going to do with that. So, we'll see what happens. For me, I'm not sure what the fit is specifically for Adam Duvall. So my grade on this trade, I'm going to give it a C+. I like Adam Duvall. I think that hitting wise, he makes perfect sense for the Red Sox. He's a pull happy, power hitting right-handed bat, which plays perfectly at Fenway. So I feel like with the bat, if he gets consistent playing time, he might be a little bit better off than he was in Atlanta or in Miami. So we'll see there. But fielding-wise, how they're going to figure out how to get him in the lineup, I'm not super sure. And I think that if he is a platoon guy, I think he overpaid. And I think it just doesn't really make sense at this point. I'm going to give it a C+. And I think it could be one of those Hunter Renfroe situations where the fit doesn't immediately make a lot of sense, but he ends up performing really, really well. So you never really know. So we'll see what happens there. But either way, good for Adam Duvall. I like Adam Duvall. And so, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. So, this is going to be a little bit more difficult for me to talk about as it's a little bit more emotional for me. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I wanted to talk about Tom Brady, and then I get into him a little bit more than a little bit later on. And now is that time. So Tom Brady, obviously the Buccaneers, his team lost to the Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs last Monday, or this past Monday, I should say, at the time of this recording. And it was sad to watch because he didn't look like himself. He didn't really have command of the offense of the team in the way that Tom Brady usually does. He had some flashes. He had some moments. But, at this point, he's 45 years old. Flashes and moments are about all you're getting. And so the question now has to be, much like we talked about last year, is Tom Brady finally done with football? And I will say this. I hope so. And I don't hope so in the same way that I hope so when Big Ben retired. Because when Big Ben retired, it was more of a, oh dear God, please get him off the field because he's going to die. And I don't feel that way about Tom Brady. I feel like he's all things considered in his career, considering how long he's played, the worst, he had one really major, torn ACL in 2008, but other than that, he has stayed relatively healthy for his entire career, which is unbelievable to think about, considering how violent the game of football is and how many times that man's been hit. So, incredible. And, obviously I don't have any insider information there. He may be hurt way, way worse than any of us know. But it's one of those things where, in the grand scheme of things, he hasn't, missed several years of time because of injuries. He hasn't, blown out his shoulder and had back surgery, and he has had knee surgery, but he hasn't had all those things pile up and everything like that. We've seen some broken fingers, a cracked rib, stuff like that. But that stuff, while obviously painful and horrible, nothing like blowing out your back or major knee and hamstring surgeries and shoulder surgeries and all that stuff. So, I don't feel the same way about Tom that I did about Ben in that way. What I mean by I hope that he's done is this year has obviously, for those of you who've been following, been a very tumultuous year for Tom Brady. He got divorced to Gisele Bündchen, his longtime wife. Basically ever since I can remember, the two have been together. For those of you who don't know, I grew up a Patriots fan. I still am. So Tom Brady is one of the pioneer figures in my life that I've seen since I was a young man, or not even a young man, a 5-year-old boy. So it's one of those things where, I can't imagine what football is without Tom Brady, but I thought I was going to imagine it last year. For those of you who remember, I actually put out not only a heartfelt clip about it, saying how much Tom Brady meant to me and how thankful I was for his career, but I also sent multiple tweets thanking him and being so happy and sad at the same time that he retired. But, then he unretired, and it just felt a little awkward. But, that's okay. I meant everything I said, and if I said it again, I'd mean it again. So, none of that's changed. It's just, again, was a little awkward, as you could all imagine. But for me, I hope that he's done because he has sacrificed everything for football. He has. You think about it. He now may not have a family when he comes home anymore. You thought about last year. It's like, oh, good, he's retiring. He's going to get to spend more time with his wife and his kids. And depending on how everything goes, unless I've missed something and they've already settled this stuff, Tom Brady, with the way divorce courts are, there's a shot that Tom Brady doesn't get to see his kids now. So he'll come home, and I'm sure he's got some hot smoking girlfriend at this point. He's Tom Brady. He'll be fine in that regard. But, it's one thing when, you have a family to come back to when you're done with football, and then it's another thing when you're alone. And Tom Brady, while he has friends, and I'm sure he has people that, love him and care for him and would do anything for him, as I hope everybody does, it's difficult when you don't have a family to come back to in that regard, in the same way that a lot of football players do that'll have kids and that'll have a wife or a husband if they are in the homosexual camp. But whatever it is, it's one of those things where I feel bad for him, because last year, if he had retired, he would have had all that, and I can't confirm this, but you feel like his decision to unretire had to do with the divorce. Can I definitively say that that's the reason for the divorce? No, because who knows? Maybe the divorce was happening anyway, and that's why he unretired. I don't know. But I have a feeling that that's not what happened. I have a feeling that he unretired, and that's when Gisele finally said that she'd had enough. And you know what? Fine. If that's the case, then I understand. So for me, I hope Tom Brady retires because I don't want him sacrificing everything he has. And he sacrificed just about everything he has. The only thing he still has is his health at this point. Presumably, obviously, I don't know for sure, but he seems like if he retired tomorrow, he would be able to live a normal life and not have bad CTE or not able to pick up his kids and grandkids and because he does actually have kids, they're still his children, and I hope that he gets to see them after the divorce and everything like that, and I presume he probably will, but you never know. It's never guaranteed in these things. So if he's already sacrificed everything else, I don't want him to sacrifice his body. I don't want him to come back next year at 46 years old trying to win just one more, and then he gets hit from behind by Chase Young or Jordan Davis, just one of these monsters that just blindsides him from the back and breaks his back, and now he's got to go into surgery at 46 and heal from a devastating back injury, or get pile driven into the ground and get a bad concussion that'll never be the same from. I don't want that. And I hope that no one else wants that either. I know there's a lot of Tom Brady haters out there. Then people say all the time that, oh, I hope he breaks his leg and never plays again and all this stuff. And, I hope that that's all made in jest, because I don't ever want anybody to have injuries like that. And I certainly don't want somebody as old as Tom Brady to have injuries like that, because I don't think it's any secret. You heal worse when you age, or as you age. So it's, when you're 25 like me, and I were to have back surgery, the chances of me making a full recovery are, a lot better than somebody who is in their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, So it just, I hope that doesn't happen. And so in that regard, I hope Tom Brady is done. I hope he signs a 10-day contract or a 1-day contract with the Patriots and retires a Patriot, rides off into the sunset, and calls it a career, because no matter what happened this year or in any year to come, Tom Brady will be the greatest quarterback of all time. He will be the greatest football player of all time, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to beat him. So it's, we said that about Joe Montana. We said that about a guy like Peyton Manning maybe when he retired. He may be the best ever. But, even Jerry Rice may be the best player ever. We said it when he retired. I don't see how anybody's going to beat Tom Brady, at least not right now. Nobody's on pace for it. If Joe Burrow plays 25 years at the pace he's going, maybe somebody like him, maybe another young quarterback that just wins Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, maybe they'll have a shot. But, I don't see it. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to do what Tom Brady's done. Ever. So I hope he's done, and I mean that in the most respectful, kind, and not demeaning way that I possibly can. My heart obviously never wants Tom Brady to stop playing, because he's Tom Brady and he's one of my idols in life, but my head is telling me he needs to quit. He needs to call it a career, because otherwise, he's going to have nothing left. And for somebody who's given as much as he has, I hope he gets everything he wants out of life after this. And I don't know if playing football at this point is going to give him the same love and happiness and passion that it once did. So, Tom, for all of us, just go, dude. I don't mean any disrespect. I don't mean any hatred. I don't want that to be taken as a challenge. It's because I and millions of other fans all around the world, whether Patriots fans, Bucks fans, just football fans in general, we love you, and we don't want to see you crumble into dust. Because as incredible as you have done up to this point of fighting Father Time, there has never been anybody that has beaten him. No one. And there never will be anyone that beats Father Time. So, just go, man. Go relax on a beach in Maui for the next 15 years, buddy, because you've earned it. You've done everything there is to do. You have records that'll never be broken. More Super Bowls than any franchise in history combined. You have MVPs and all first team All Pros and Pro Bowls and just There's nothing left for you to do. You won a championship without Bill Belichick. You proved that you could do that. There's nothing left for you to prove. So just go and save your back and your knees and your brain. Please. Just go. Ladies and gentlemen, it is about that time for my next top 5 NBA list. The response to these have been so overwhelmingly positive. I am so grateful for you guys for reaching out to me and just saying how much you guys want these lists and you know how much you guys have liked them and it's just been great and you know. Again, I'm so grateful. I'm almost lost for words. So thank you guys so much. And I know I said last video that I'm probably gonna have to take a break from these, and I do mean that. You know, probably next week is gonna be the start of it, honestly. So you know, hopefully I'll get one out for you guys, but I might not be able to. But the reason for that is pretty simple. There's gonna be a lot more to talk about. In terms of football, and I really want to take a deep dive into the semifinal games. There's just too many playoff games to really go into. With the new playoff brackets and everything like that. So, I'm very excited for that. But in terms of our lists, just keep an eye out for those. I'm hoping to keep getting those out for you guys. But like I said, I might have to take a break from those here in the next couple of weeks. But in terms of this list, it's going to be my top 5 NBA teams that I feel should have won a championship. But obviously didn't win a championship. So, a couple of ground rules for this list. I tried to stick to individual teams, so from individual years, not necessarily a team era, although there is a couple of those in there just because I couldn't decide on one specific year for that team. If it was a team that, you know, lost in the playoffs or lost in the finals several years in a row or a few times in a handful of years and never ended up pulling through, whatever it is, you know, I tried my best to stick to an individual team from an individual year, but you will see, obviously, as we go into it, that there will be some more era teams going on there. Another rule for this list is it's all subjective, obviously, but what I did try to do was I tried to kind of have, you know, team talent play a factor into where they rank on the list as well. So if I think a team was, you know, really, really robbed or better than, you know, necessarily another team on the list, or had more talent on the team, then they're probably going to be ranked higher, although that's not always the case. But I did try to keep that as even as I could, so that it's not just teams that I enjoyed watching, because, you know, spoilers, some of these teams I was not alive to watch, or I was way too young to remember watching. So it's one of those things where, you know, for me, I didn't want my own like enjoyment bias to get in the way or recency bias to get in the way, you know, like so hopefully you guys can understand that and it makes sense, because I know I probably didn't explain that as well as I probably could have, but point being, you know, skill level is going to play a part in what we're talking about, but I didn't want to have recency bias or my own enjoyment bias get in the way. So there's kind of a mixed bag there. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoy this list. Please, 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 let me know if I forgot anybody or if there's a team that you guys think should have been on here. If a team should have been higher, if it should have been lower. I'm going to have some honorable mentions. If one of the honorable mentions should have taken the place of one of the teams on the list. So, you know, whatever it is, please comment down below so that I can take that into consideration. If you guys have any ideas for lists that you want me to do, I would love to get some suggestions from you guys. So certainly if you guys have any lists that you want me to do, let me know in the comments section. Let me know on Twitter or on Facebook or anything like that, and I will certainly do my very best to get those things for you. And I'd love to interact with you guys on these lists. So, without further ado, let's get this thing started with number 5 is going to be the 1972 Milwaukee Bucks. I obviously said a little bit earlier, some of these teams I was not alive to watch. This clearly is one of those teams. The Milwaukee Bucks in 1972 had a fantastic team. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson, Lucius Allen, and Bob Dandridge, just to name a few. Dandridge and Lucius Allen and Kareem, obviously, were three of the best defenders in the league at the time. This was an absolutely stacked Milwaukee Bucks team. They finished the season with over 60 wins. They were the number one seed in the East going into the playoffs. But in the finals, they ended up running into an absolute buzzsaw in the Los Angeles Lakers of 1972. And so this team is largely forgotten about in history. And so I wanted to include them on this list. My number 5 best team that I feel like should have won a championship. Number 4, a much more recent example, the 2017 Houston Rockets. Now, this may be out of left field for some people because at this point, the Houston Rockets really don't have much of an identity. They are a team that is completely in just full rebuild mode. They don't really have a style of play that they necessarily do. They don't have any signature players. Obviously, a guy like Jalen Green is going to turn out to be a star, and he probably already is. But in 2017, the Houston Rockets were a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, for those of you who remember, James Harden, Chris Paul, Eric Gordon, Clint Capella. So, and that's just to name a few of the guys on that team. So, it was a lot of fun to watch this team. This team was one of those teams that really revolutionized the game of basketball in a lot of ways, and people don't really talk about it. Most people just give credit to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and the Warriors for the three-point boom in the NBA, and rightfully so. They certainly earned a lot of that recognition because of how successful they've been. But right there with the Warriors at this time were the Houston Rockets. They were chucking up threes like it was nobody's business, and they were going in. And James Harden was establishing himself as one of the best players in the NBA and eventually would take home an MVP. But despite all that, it was, playoff time. And James Harden has that tag on him that he's not a big game performer and he can't play well in the playoffs. But at least for me, in my opinion, they had the best shot of beating the Warriors that year, and it showed when they played in the Western Conference Finals. I feel like if Chris Paul was not hurt, they would have won that series. But we all know the story. Game 7 rolls around. Houston Rockets at home go 0 for 27 in a stretch from 3. Just abysmal. Their three-point shot completely and utterly let them down. And it was heartbreaking for a lot of people because I feel like, honestly, the Rockets were a better team that year. And I feel like they could have won the championship had they made it there. And it didn't happen. And so they are number 4 on my list. Number 3, the 2002 Sacramento Kings. So the Sacramento Kings in 2002, it's very interesting to talk about now because, most people my age or definitely younger than me will sit there and think the Kings were good. Yes, the Kings were very, very good at one point, and which makes it even more heartbreaking, the fact that they really can't, figure it the heck out at this point in their franchise history. There's nothing that they have really been able to do that's been sustainable. But in 2002, their roster was absolutely loaded. Chris Webber, Peja Stojakovic, Vlade Divac, Mike Bibby, and that's just to name a few. They had a lot of talent on that roster. And at that time, there was only one king of the castle in the NBA, and that was the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. And the Kings knew exactly how to beat them. Throw a bunch of bodies at Shaq, make him shoot free throws. And their roster was perfectly built for that. They had several big guys that they thought would be able to help stop Shaq. And it looked like in the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers that it was going to work out. And then, one of the most famous and infamous, really, conspiracies in the history of sports ends up coming to fruition, where obviously disgraced referee Tim Donaghy comes out and says that particular series, Game 6 of that particular series, the Kings versus the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, was rigged to the point where the NBA basically forced the Lakers to win that game. They ended up winning in Game 7, and there you go. Kings don't go to the NBA Finals. They instead go home, and people leave in free agency, people get traded, people underperform, people get older, and that's that. So, Sacramento Kings are left in the dust to history. And it's a shame because having gone back and watched this team more, because obviously at the time I was 5 years old, so couldn't really pay much attention to that kind of stuff. They were a lot of fun. Peja Stojakovic was a shooter in a time where being a shooter wasn't cool. Mike Bibby was one of the best and most in flashiest point guards in the NBA, and it was a lot of fun. Chris Webber is one of the most underrated power forwards of all time. He's definitely worthy of Hall of Fame status, but I don't think he gets a ton of love, as much love as he should, because unless I'm completely out of my mind, he never won a championship. He didn't really play on teams that were very good other than the 2002 and 2001-ish Sacramento Kings. So that team was a lot of fun to watch, and it's a shame that they never won a championship, so they are number 3 on my list. Number 2, the 1993 Phoenix Suns. So the 1993 Phoenix Suns, for those of you who do not know of it or remember, they lost to the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals, as literally everyone in the Western Conference did over a period of 7-ish to 8-ish to 9-ish, whatever it was, years in the 80s and 90s. But they were stacked, the Phoenix Suns were. Charles Barkley was the headline player on that team, one of the best players of all time. Kevin Johnson, who was very, very underrated, and still is, quite frankly, a fantastic player. Dan Majerle was also on that team, a very, very good scorer in his own right. And, of course, Danny Ainge, who typically came off the bench. But obviously, Danny Ainge is very famous for now being the former president of the Boston Celtics, and now I don't know if he's president of the Utah Jazz, but he is definitely up there making personnel decisions, director of personnel, whatever he is, over in Utah. And look at how good Utah is doing this year, so they're really killing it. So Danny Ainge on that team as well. Figured I'd give him a shout out. But anyway, the 93 Phoenix Suns were one of those teams that just dominated in the regular season, dominated in the playoffs, and then just ran into an absolute buzzsaw in the Chicago Bulls, and they had no answer for Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and the crew. So, there's not really a whole lot to say other than that. A fantastic team that ran into the greatest of all time and couldn't do anything about it. Not super, crazy or anything like that, but in terms of talent, this team was Charles Barkley's best chance of winning a championship. He's one of the most famous athletes and best athletes in any sport that never won a championship, and this was his best shot to do it. So wanted to give him a shout out here. They are number 2 on my list. So, you guys want to know who number 1 is? Well, before we do that, let's get into some honorable mentions. So I have a few here that I want to get into. The 2007 Phoenix Suns. So obviously back-to-back Phoenix Suns here, although obviously these guys just missed the cut of my list. So the Phoenix Suns at this time, this is one of my favorite teams of all time. I really wanted to put them on my list. I did. But here's the thing. As I said at the top of the video here, I did not want to have my recency bias or my fun bias really get in the way of this list. And when you look at the talent, the pure talent of this team, they don't match up as well as some of the other teams that I have already mentioned in terms of Hall of Fame status. They were great. A lot of players on this team were great for their day. But other than Steve Nash, there's not a whole lot of guys that were transcendently good. And even Steve Nash, you could argue if he was transcendently good or if he was just really, really good. I just think that the talent doesn't match up. So in terms of best team to never win a championship, they just missed my cut. But in terms of the most fun team to never win a championship, if that was this list, I'd probably put these guys at number 1. I loved watching the 2007 Phoenix Suns. They're one of my favorite teams of all time. They should have won a championship that year, and it just didn't happen, and it breaks my heart. Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Leandro Barbosa, Sean Marion, Boris Diaw, I'm forgetting somebody, Raja Bell, that's who I'm forgetting. Fantastic deep team that would run and get out in transition and score a ton of points before it was really cool. Mike D'Antoni had that offense working swimmingly back in a time where that wasn't necessarily the best way to play basketball, but it was a lot of fun. So, what happened in the Western Conference, I believe semi-finals, I want to say, against the Spurs, they kind of got robbed. Steve Nash got body checked, and, a couple of guys on their bench stepped out to, help defend him. But there was a rule at the time, and I'm not sure it still exists. I think they've changed it now, where if you step on the court from the bench in an unauthorized way, you not only get a technical foul, but you get suspended for the next game. And that's what happened. Steve Nash got hurt from that check. I believe he broke his nose. A couple of players that were important for the Suns got suspended. They ended up losing the next game and then ended up losing the series. All the momentum of that game and of that series was completely wiped out from underneath them. And I think that was by far, Steve Nash's best chance to win a championship. Another one of those great players that never won a championship. It's really a tragedy. But yeah, 2007 Phoenix Suns, my first honorable mention. My number 2 honorable mention, the 1995 Orlando Magic. Another team that ran into the buzzsaw that is the Chicago... Oh, no, actually, no, they didn't run into the Chicago Bulls. Whatever it was, the Orlando Magic with Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, Nick Anderson, Horace Grant, and the crew, they were really, really good. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to really argue against, Penny Hardaway, who I believe would have been a Hall of Famer had he been able to stay healthy. Horace Grant's one of the most underrated players of all time, and then obviously we don't have to talk about Shaq. I mean, Shaquille O'Neal's the most dominant force in the history of the NBA, arguably. So that was in his prime, and it's just a fantastic team. It ended up not amounting to anything other than runner-ups. The 2007 Dallas Mavericks, 2 2007 teams in my honorable mentions. I'm not going to lie to you guys because, I don't like to lie to you guys or to anybody, but I didn't put together that these two teams had happened in the same year. And it's just crazy that the Spurs ended up, winning that championship and everybody celebrates, but I think that two teams got absolutely bamboozled out of championships in that season. Obviously, the Dallas Mavericks being one of them. Dirk Nowitzki won an MVP in 2007. They won 67 games as a franchise that year. Unbelievable. And what happened to the Dallas Mavericks? Did they make it to the finals and lose? No. Did they make it to the Western Conference finals and lose? No. They didn't make it out of the first round of the playoffs. They lost to the Golden State Warriors, the 8 seed, with good old Baron Davis as their driving force. In the first round of the playoffs, lost to the 8 seed, and I think in 5 games, too. Like, it wasn't even a close series. The Golden State Warriors just took it to them. And so that definitely is one of the more famous teams to never win a championship. And so the Dallas Mavericks make my honorable mentions list. The 2005 Los Angeles Lakers. Now, this team, you could argue, oh, goodness, Tyler, they've won so many championships. Who cares about the Lakers? But you got to understand, this is a team that's coming off a three-peat, right? They're coming off winning 3 straight championships, and they are embarking on championship number 4, and they have a team that is basically the same team they had for their three-peat, with the addition of Gary Payton and Karl Malone. Now, obviously, both those guys were well past their prime. You're not getting prime Gary Payton, who was, nicknamed the Glove and most famously at least claims to be the guy that gave Michael Jordan the most problems, although Michael Jordan obviously doesn't feel that way, and who knows. And then Karl Malone. Some argue the best power forward of all time. I don't feel that way, but he's up there, certainly. He's definitely top 3. For 100% certain, he's top 3. So, me personally, I look at the 2005 Lakers team as the best of the Lakers teams that Shaq and Kobe were on, and they didn't win the championship. And what's crazy to me is they didn't win the championship because they lost to a juggernaut. They lost to a team that had no All-Stars on it in the 2005 Detroit Pistons. Now, to say that they don't have any All-Stars, that makes them sound like they're a bad team. No, 2005 Pistons are one of my favorite teams in NBA history because they beat a juggernaut Lakers team without really having anybody that was as good on that team as Kobe Bryant or Shaq. Big Ben Wallace, one of my favorite players of all time. Good defender, but couldn't play offense, and he was undersized for a center. But he won multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards. Obviously the great Chauncey Billups. Never going to be the best point guard in basketball, but was just so good for so many years. Rip Hamilton, a guy that, is very underrated in the history of basketball. Rasheed Wallace, a guy that is, again, another guy that's criminally underrated in the history of basketball. So many other guys on that team. Tayshaun Prince, another guy that was pretty good. So they didn't have, all-stars, but they had 5, 6, 7, 8, however many guys that were just really, really, really good, and they played as a team, and they played unbelievable defense, and they gave the Lakers fits in that series. So the Lakers, another team that I feel could have won a championship, but did not. And I clicked on the wrong one, so I apologize for you guys who saw that. My last team is the 90s Utah Jazz. And this is the one team, I know I said I was going to stick to individual teams, but I couldn't decide because the Utah Jazz in the 90s just got reamed by Michael Jordan. I mean, it's just one of those teams that, had obviously John Stockton, Karl Malone, two of the best players to ever walk the earth on the same team for a number of years, for a decade plus, and never won anything with it. And that's a shame because neither of those guys won a championship, even though they played together their whole careers, and they were really, really good. They won 60-plus games multiple times, number one seed in the West multiple times. They were not a bad team. Michael Jordan was just better, and that sucks. So I couldn't pick one team for these guys to, I couldn't pick one of the years to put on this list, so I basically just put all of them, and that is the end of my honorable mentions. So I hope you guys liked those, agree with those. I kind of already spoiled it because I accidentally hit the wrong button, but you know what? That's okay, because I feel like it's obvious, right? The answer is obvious for those of us who've watched basketball in the last decade, and I clicked on the wrong button again. I'm not doing okay today. No, it's fine. So the number one team is the 2016 Golden State Warriors. I mean, it's not even close for me. If they're not my favorite team that's never won a championship. If that was it, obviously the 2007 Phoenix Suns are going to be there. But in terms of the best teams to never win a championship, that's like if I were to make the same list for the NFL and not put the 2007 Patriots there. They literally went undefeated until the Super Bowl and didn't win the Super Bowl. They're the best team to never win the Super Bowl. That's just how it would work. Like there's no other team that I could possibly put. And for me, it's the same way. The 2016 Warriors, there's no other team that makes sense. 73 wins, the most wins in franchise history. It's just not close. They lost to the Cavs in the finals after blowing a 3-1 lead. And for me, again, they were they're considered maybe the best team ever. The best basketball team to ever walk the earth other than the Dream Team or the Redeem Team for the Olympics. Like, this is historically good basketball being played on a regular basis every night. Winning games without their starters, resting guys and still winning games. It was unbelievable to watch at the time. And so the fact that they did not win the championship after going 73-9, I think it's a no-brainer. The Golden State Warriors in 2016 are the number one team to not win a championship. And that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I will certainly keep you guys in mind with your comments, with everything that you guys have been giving to me over the last couple of months. And I have big high goals that I'm going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks for this podcast over the next few months to few years, obviously. So keep an eye out for that. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.